Welcome to the Salty Swede Presents, friends. One of the frustrations I see most often on resin Facebook pages is about blooms. Blooms are hard, there's no doubt about that. So, your first task is to be patient with yourself and understand that your bloom may not turn out the way you want it to. A bloom should be attempted after you've tried a few other projects and understand how resin works. I've made blooms before with some success, but this blue coaster has probably been my best so far. I'm going to take a hard look at this one to decide what I want to do differently and how I can improve. I'll also be taking a look at some of my bloom failures to see where I went wrong. My first order of business is to come up with a game plan. I'm going to use my geode coaster mold, which holds a total of 100 milliliters of resin. I'm going to sketch out how I want to pour this, which will help me determine how much of each color I'll need. My previous notes will help me with this. The mold I used for the blue bloom isn't very shiny inside. That's my first criticism. And I'm not wild about how the glass pieces in the middle look. They broke the surface of the resin a bit, and I'm not happy with that, so I'll skip it this time. My geode mold is pretty shiny inside, so I'll hope for the best. I need to account for a second layer, or backer, to give the bloom dimension. I'll leave out 20 mils for that and use a total of 80 mils for my first pour. I'll divide it into 4 parts, 15 for mica, 15 for translucent alcohol ink, 40 for clear, and 10 for my ocean white. Once I've got my resin mixed up, I'll use just a bit of it to make a paste for my mica powder. If you struggle getting your mica to be smooth, I highly recommend this technique. I put just enough resin in to cover the bottom of the cup and then add all of the mica powder I need for my pour. By doing it this way, I'm allowing the mica powder to melt into the resin, which will make it much easier to combine with more resin. It also allows the bubbles to escape more easily because it's in a thin layer. The downside, though, is that you need to know how much mica you'll need for your resin ahead of time. If I add more mica to my resin after it's been mixed, I'll end up with the same problem I had when I didn't make a paste. I tend to go heavy on mica powder, but experiment and see what you like. While I'm making that paste, I'll put my resin in my degassing machine. I've got plenty of work time for this project. In fact, time is on my side, and I want my resin to be good and hot for a bloom. Once my resin is out of the degassing machine, I'll let it stand for a while so it gets hot. If I separate the resin into small portions right away, it might not get hot enough for the bloom to work. Each resin is different, so you'll need to find the process that works best for your resin. I needed to get to about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Investing in a thermometer will help you know when the time is right. An infrared is the tidiest way to test your resin. Once I can see the heating process is underway, I'll finish dividing the resin into the colors I need. My mica paste is now very easy to incorporate into my resin. I'm using Let's Resin Ocean White for my project. When I made the blue coaster, I did a second one using Sinker White instead, and I wasn't happy with the result. The white was too translucent, and although I could have added more, I don't see why that would be better than using ocean white unless you don't have it. Ocean white is a pigment and it's heavy. Sinker ink is much lighter and will float more than the pigment. But if you use too much white, it'll all sink to the bottom of the mold and look blobby. We want just enough pigment to make it float in the resin. For this, I'm using just a dab on the end of my stick. I want it to look like skim milk. My alcohol ink layer should be pretty translucent, but you can experiment to see what you like best. This is a very small amount of resin, so add the ink 1 drop at a time. Once it's in there, you can't get it back out. My temperature is getting up there, so now I'm ready to pour. Some people spray their molds with 91% alcohol, but I don't. It's hard on your molds, and I usually get bubbles anyway, but if it makes you happy, spray away. My outside ring will be mica, so I'll pour this slowly around the edge, doing my best to keep it as close to the side of the mold as possible. This is slow work, so take your time and use a turntable if you have one. Anywhere mica touches the mold will show up in your finished project, so clean up any drips you have. Once I've poured all my mica, I'll move on to the ink and pour it right next to the mica layer. Now I'll pour my clear. I don't have a perfect understanding of this yet because I hate making blooms, but when I pour the clear in the center, it's going to push the ink and mica out, and then some of it will flow back towards the center, dragging the mica along with it. Remember, resin will always move away from the silicone mold. Keep that in mind when you're trying to understand where your resin will end up. Part of the reason blooms are so hard is because you can't really see what's happening until you demold it. And you've got to do 2 pours, which means you'll have to wait even longer. I'm impatient enough with my resin projects. Having to wait even longer to know if it turned out is a real bummer. Now it's time for the white. I bought these little piping bags on Amazon, and what I found works best is to use a skinny jar to hold it open and then pour the resin in. Then I'll move all the resin down to the tip and twist up the bag opening. Once I'm ready to pipe, I'll cut a tiny bit of the corner off to get the resin flowing. You could probably use a Ziploc bag to do this, but the piping bags are a sturdier plastic, so they work nicer than a Ziploc. There are many different ways you can pipe the white, but for this one, I'm going to keep it simple and do circles. My lines look very thin with my first pass, so I'll go back for another layer right on top of the first. When the white first comes out of the bag, it falls in a blob. That's normal. I just need to spread that blob out a little bit so it's not so noticeable later. A dotting tool works well for this. I hate to waste resin, so it's tempting to use all of it, but that's a mistake, as you can see in this green bloom. I'm going to stick with my plan and only use what I need to make the design I want and no more. Each resin will perform a bit differently, but I've let mine get to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It's now been an hour since my initial stir. Some practice with your resin is needed to know the best time to do this. The white has sunken down into the clear a bit, and you can see that the mica ring has started to move towards the center. Now I'm going to drag the white around so that it will look like a flower. I'll start by dragging from the outside in. Take this slow and don't touch the bottom of the mold if you can avoid it. That can damage your mold and change your design. Dragging fast could lead to bubbles, so be patient. Once I've dragged to the inside, I need to drag from the center out. Make sure you drag it past the edge of the mold, or that line will pull back into the center. Now I'm using a silicone tool to clean up after myself. Then I need to create some interest in the center. So I'll do a swirl and then leave it to cure overnight. Here's how it looks the next day. I'm pretty excited about it so far, but I can't really see the finished product because I need to pour my backer. If I flip it over, I can kind of see how it looks through the mold, but not really. I forgot to record pouring the backing layer, but it's pretty simple. Choose the color you want and fill up the rest of the mold. I decided to go with gold for the back, and I wish now that I'd left a bit more room in my mold because the gold is pretty thin. Next time I'll use 70-30 for my ratio. And although I like how the gold looks, it would have been more dramatic if I had used a darker color. Oh well. I like how it turned out, although in my personal opinion, the juice ain't worth the squeeze when it comes to blooms. I'll do them once in a while, but I think there's a lot more fun to be had with resin. So if it's not working for you, try another technique for a while and come back to it when you've had a few successes. Thanks for watching.